I think the first lesson that I learned, and it took me some time to get to that point, is never let somebody else's opinion about you define you. I would simply say that you need to just find your self confidence and self belief and start with believing in yourself every single day that I'm in charge of my own happiness, I'm in charge of my own life, and I will do whatever it takes to meet my own dreams.
That's important, right?
I think it has to start from there, that I'm in charge of my own happiness, I'm in charge of my own life, and I will do whatever it takes.
Hi, I'm Meeta, and welcome to my podcast, Moola with Meeta. Today I'm going to be talking to my guest, Smita. Hi, Smita. Thank you so much for joining in today, and I am super excited to talk to you. And you know, you've always been my inspiration, you've been my role model. And so tell me, what does know your worth look like to you, both professionally as well as personally?
First of all, thank you so much, Meeta. I'm so excited to be here speaking to you on this very passionate subject. Know your worth, I think, is about self-belief and self-respect. I believe that each one of us has to be our own cheerleader. Only if you respect yourself can you command respect from the others. And therefore, I would like to summarize, say, know your worth is about standing tall with confidence.
And so, how come you stood tall? I mean, we know that a lot of women face issues about standing tall. You know, because of our cultural conditioning and so many other factors, we shy away from standing tall. How come you have, and from when have you seen yourself standing tall for yourself?
It takes me back, way back to when I was in school. I used to take part in plays on All India Radio.
Okay.
And the first time I got paid for doing that part, I was super kicked. Just the idea that you can do something for which somebody is willing to pay you is hugely empowering. So I think that was for me the start of the feeling that okay, I can do something and I'm valuable to someone, because not to say that worth is only in monetary terms, but I think the ability to earn on your own is an important step.
100%, right? And if you do it at a young age, I think the first thing is the kick that you get. And the second is, of course, it makes you feel important to yourself. I mean, I remember myself when I was younger, and the first time in fact, I was with ICICI Bank. I was in a stall and I was working with ICICI Bank, and I got my big check. At that time, 3,000 rupees was a big amount, and I actually got 3,000 rupees, and I'm like, oh, I feel on top of the world. So I can totally imagine how you felt about that. But then how did you take that forward? I mean, okay, fair, you understood probably you even didn't understand the value of money. How old were you at that time?
Must have been 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So at that time, one doesn't have that kind of an understanding probably of what money really means. So how did that feeling of empowerment or that feeling of self-worth continue to grow in you? Was it your family? Was it, how did, I mean, is your mother working? Did she inspire you? What was your source of inspiration?
So both my parents were very, very supportive in terms of making sure that instilling in us that education is really important, because they strongly believed, and they were themselves a product of it, that if you are well educated, it's the best foundation you can have to build your life in the future. And you need to build your life on your own, was the clear message that they had for all their kids, that on your own you need to be capable. Like, we are here, we will support you to get to that point, but we do not want you to think that, okay, now once I leave from my parents' place, I'm going to just find a nice husband, and thanks to my husband I will be well settled, or will be able to do what I want to do. That was never part of the conversation in that way. It was always about, what do you want to do, how can you make that happen, what would you like to do to become independent, to become what are you passionate about. So I think it came from from my parents, and it just that was how it started. I did my CA, I took up my first job at ICICI, and then life just carried on, and it kept opening doors, because once you enjoy working, you enjoy earning money, you enjoy interacting and meeting people, you enjoy that attention and that confidence, you get into kind of a vicious cycle of personal growth.
Absolutely. I love it. When you said that you start, feeling empowered when you start getting attention, when people start seeing things around you and say that, oh, she's performing, she's doing well, and they kind of validate you in some which way. It makes you feel important. It makes you feel good about yourself. So, I mean, that's something which I think every girl feels. Despite that, a lot of girls, which I have seen, they kind of drop out somewhere in the middle. Why didn't you drop out? I mean, considering that I'm sure the challenges as a woman must be the same for you as in for other girls. So you have a family, you have kids, you have all of that. Did it not make you feel that at some point that I should drop out of that? Or was it because you were so inspired and your work was so good that you wanted to continue? Or one more question probably. Is it that it was a support from your organization? Did your organization in some which way support you in continuing your work despite having a family and other responsibilities?
Yeah, you've asked a lot of things, but
Yes.
I'll try and address all of them. So first of all, every journey is fraught with challenges. Whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, I think everybody goes through their own set of challenges. It could be different set of challenges that women face, and nobody's journey would be easy, no matter how successful that person may have been now. But it's going to be quite unbelievable to say that that person never faced any challenges. So I had my share of challenges, and all kinds of challenges, like your identity, your worth also is questioned. Many times I would be part of meetings where along with a male colleague of mine, and all the conversation would be directed at him, even if I'm the one leading the conversation. So it makes you feel less, it makes you feel humiliated. I used to have one of my boss, whenever he would talk to me, he would never look at me, and he would never address me by name. It was very humiliating to experience that. And then I thought, after some time, it took me a while to come to this conclusion that the problem is not with me. The problem is with him and his insecurity around senior women colleagues. So I think the first lesson that I learned, and it took me some time to get to that point, is never let somebody else's opinion about you define you.
Wow. Yes.
You are what you choose to be. Not necessarily because someone said something to you or someone disagreed with what you may be saying, that makes you wrong, that makes you small. There may be a million reasons why that person said what they said. And there's absolutely no reason for you to just take that as the final truth. And that's a mistake I think many of us end up making, because we just take that to be the gospel's truth, oh my God, and then start behaving and acting as if that were true.
Pivotal moment in your life where you realized that that whatever a person, opinion is, whether it's your colleague or it's your senior who's not supporting you, how did that change for you, that you recognize that it doesn't matter what they think, it's more about you? Was there some pivotal moment or some reflection that you have of what made you think or change that thought about yourself?
I can't recall a single moment that kind of made that switch. I think it just happens with me. It happened over time, because I think as you keep at it, you start seeing you start seeing and believing in what you are doing more and more, and therefore it becomes less relevant what others think or say.
I love that. That's true.
And at least for me, it was kind of a gradual process. I wouldn't say there was this one switch on off kind of a thing. And I think it's just a process of you becoming wiser with experience and wiser with age.
That's true. But what about the support system? So, I mean, assume that you had a boss who was not very supportive of you, or a boss who didn't really, stand up for you. But do you think a support system within an organization is important? And did you see some of that happening in your organization at that time?
Absolutely. In fact, I wouldn't have been able to come this far if I hadn't got that support, both professionally from the organizations that I was part of, as well as from my family. I think it's a combination of multiple support systems that one needs. For example, when I was at ICICI, they used to run a creche.
Okay, I remember way back then.
This was like, more than 20 years ago.
Right.
I'm talking about
late
that.
90s or something.
They had started that, which was a big support at that time. And it definitely helped me come back to work with a more peaceful mind than I would have otherwise. And maybe I would have taken longer time off, or decided not to come back, or I don't know what it would have been. So that, for example, is of course, today the world is much different. We all have the flexibility of work from home, and there are so many other support systems that have come into play, of working remotely, which was not the case back then. But there was all of this other support, even the support from the family. But I would like to say that the support comes after you have made your decision. You need to make your own decision about what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you keep waiting for permission, there were enough people in my family who said, now that you have kids, maybe you should take a break. You've really worked very hard. You've already done so well. What's the need for you to continue? Enjoy your family life, enjoy your kids, and there's no need. You're doing very well financially. Just take a break.
Exactly. Yeah, that happens all the time.
It happens all the time, and it is true.
Yeah.
There was no need, financially or otherwise, to say that I have to work 12 hours a day, and then also take care of the home and the kids and the family and meet all other social expectations that one would have. So it was not about expectations. This was all about what I wanted to do. And I did not want to kind of say I'm giving up something to do something. I was very happy doing my work, and I just wanted that to continue, knowing fully well that I do have additional responsibilities. I do have time that needs to be allocated for other things that I was not probably spending time on before. But very consciously I made that call that I want to do all of this.
Wow.
And then, of course, once you are clear, you get the support from this family, you get the support from the organization, you start looking for support, you start creating that support.
Yeah, I love it. So first thing you talked about was permission. You don't need to take others' permission, right? And I was doing a talk yesterday, and there was this girl who actually said that I am not allowed to do a particular thing because my parents are, against it. And I said, why do you need to ask for that permission from them? And that came as a shock to her, really, that oh, is it something that I can own for myself and say, I want to do that, and it's not a permission that I need from others? So I think that's one thing which is really, really important from a woman's perspective, that stop taking permission from people and have clarity in your own head of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And I think that's beautiful. And then the support comes automatically, right? Because you start seeking support, right? That is
Because you start
beautiful.
seeking support. And that's why I come back to my first point I made is you have to be your own cheerleader. You have to be your own decision maker. You are in charge of your life. You are the CEO of your life. Do not give that power or authority away to anybody else.
Beautiful. So empowering and so well said. So, how do we make this happen for the women? I mean, you've been through so many organizations, you've headed, divisions and companies, you've been in the United Nations, you've been a part of RBI, you've been a part of ICICI, you've been a part of VC funds, so many different kind of organizations. And you're also in some way in some bit of policy making and those kind of initiatives. So how do you think we can change this for the women around us, and what is your thought around financial literacy specifically for women?
First of all, I feel finance is very important and relevant to everyone. It's kind of in our lives everywhere. Okay, it's there's nobody who's untouched by finance. You're making payments, you're buying something, you're selling something, you are saving some money, you are borrowing from someone. It's there in everybody's life. I think the big thing that is needed is how smartly and how consciously are you using all of those tools to make your life better. These are financial tools, financial products, financial services. These are all a means to an end. They are not a end by themselves.
True.
So what is the end? The end that we are talking about is that you need to have your a better life. You need to be able to meet your future aspirations. You need to be able to deal with shocks and emergencies and exigencies that happen. You need to, above all, be confident of the way your financial life is unfolding. So, initially, the whole focus on financial inclusion was around providing access, because a lot of people simply did not even have access to simple financial products like a bank account, or an ability to make a digital payment, or an ability to borrow from someone in a safe, secure way. So the thrust for the longest time was on improving that access. We've almost kind of crossed over that hump with near 90% people, at least in India. It's been a phenomenal journey, and most parts of the world also. The next thing is the ability. After access, you need to have the ability to understand and to use that.
True.
And so a lot of people have access but do not have the ability. A lot of people have access and ability but do not have the authority
Wow.
to act
So true.
and decide. I feel financial empowerment is a combination of all of this.
So well said. Ability, authority, and access.
So, because at the end of the day, that you need to have, each person needs to have full agency over how they are using these financial tools, what decisions they are making, and how to make those decisions in their best interest. What works for them? What do they want to achieve? What are their goals and aspirations? Somebody wants to start a new business. Somebody wants to build a new home. Somebody wants to make sure that their child gets the best possible education. Somebody wants to make sure that I marry my daughter very well. All kinds of different aspirations people have. And the role of finance is to help you kind of bridge that time factor between when you're earning, when you need to spend, bulk responsibilities that you might have. And that's exactly why you have this plethora of products. But I think majority of the people barely use it,
True.
or barely use it to the fullest extent for their own benefit.
Why?
Again, I think it's a combination of lack of understanding, lack of transparency from the supply side, also in sharing full information around what is, how things work, what is what. And lastly, as I said, their internal will to kind of own it and to want to make their own decisions with full knowledge.
So when you said, absolutely, well said, when you said it's both from the demand side as well as the supply side. So let's talk about the supply side first. Do you think organizations can make it easier for people to start understanding financial products, or understanding how they can use it, or also understanding the risks behind them, so that people, or is it because it's against their profit making? The ultimately it's about profit making. Every organization wants to make profit, and because of which they hide certain truths, or not hide, they refrain from giving you open understanding of documents, or you don't read the fine print, because most people won't read the fine print, so you say things behind that. So how do you think organizations can make a difference from their side, and if they can, what is the kind of difference that you think for accessing financial products better for the world at large, and of course women in particular, because they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they don't have the will to also read so much of fine print and go deeper into such things? So do you think it can be made easier for women by the companies?
I definitely think that the banking and finance industry, the supply side, has a big responsibility and a big role to play in making it easier, simpler for the consumers. And I love to give an example. You have a mobile phone, I have a mobile phone. This was probably one of the most complicated machines
True.
that has ever been invented. How many of us, when we buy a mobile phone, read up a manual before starting to use the mobile phone?
So true. None at all, right?
We don't.
Yeah.
Because it's so intuitive. And why? And because it's so intuitive, it's simple to understand. Yes, there are some people who may want to seek some help. So you ask your son or your daughter or your colleague or someone else, okay, how do you use this feature? But by and large, you are able to figure out, even when you get a completely new model that you've never used before, a new make that you've never used before, you don't sit and read the manual.
True.
So I really feel that financial services, in fact, people have this kind of a fear factor about, oh my God, if it's finances, it means it must be complicated.
Yeah.
And it's not for me.
Yeah. 100%, and for women 100%.
So there is that resistance that comes because of the underlying belief that it must be complicated, it must be too difficult and too complex for someone like me to understand.
True.
So the first step, I think, is to dispel that myth.
Yes.
And to really make it very open, accessible, simple. So be it, and again, I've been part of a bank, so I understand that as bankers we are so used to using jargon, and we would very routinely tell a customer that your account has been debited. But how would someone know what does that mean?
What does debit mean, right?
What does your account has been debited mean?
Yes.
It's Greek and Latin to that person.
Yes.
But for a banker, it's normal language.
Yes.
You wouldn't even think twice that you said something
Yes, which needs to be opened
explained.
out or explained anymore.
And the customer obviously will not have the confidence to ask you again, what does that mean? But many of them would just withdraw that, oh my God, I don't understand. When I go and talk to my bank, they say things which I'm not able to understand. So it's better I don't go.
Yeah.
or I go with someone who is more informed and who's more knowledgeable, and I
Absolutely.
will then rely on that person to explain it to me.
True. True.
So it's simple things like this that can make a huge difference. And that's what I was saying, the transparency about what is it. And when you talked about, yes, of course, all organizations are for-profit organizations. They have their stakeholders that they are responsible towards, and they need to kind of deliver results for their stakeholders. But I don't think this is an either or. You can do good to your customers and to your stakeholders. I don't think it's about making a choice whether are you good to your customers or are you good to your shareholders. In fact, you will be giving good returns to your shareholders if your customers are happy with you.
So well said. Yes, so true. So, are things being done towards that end? Any idea about if things are being made simpler and more customer centric from the supply side?
There is a lot of effort, I think, across the board. There is a lot of effort. In fact, the whole digitization journey itself, if you see, the way everybody has now become so comfortable using a QR code for payment. Because one of the biggest stumbling blocks in people using their mobile to do any financial transaction was the fear that I will make a mistake and my money will get lost. Because as soon as you ask someone to type a number, you hesitate, not because you think your bank will do something wrong. Actually, one of our researchers had pointed out that it's the fear of I will make a mistake. And because of my mistake, my money will be lost. Because I'm not comfortable typing, I'm not comfortable with numbers.
True.
I may add 2 extra zeros or something else. And so when you take that away by using a QR code where you're simply scanning and everything comes pre-populated, it has just completely changed the experience and the usage and the confidence level of people to use it.
So true. I never thought of it that way, that a QR code is making life simpler because, yes, you don't have to type so much and then you can make mistakes then. That's so true. So I think, yes, that's a fair thing. And what about policies? Do you think in terms of policies, in terms of government initiatives to increase the literacy levels? And I see a lot is happening. I mean, I see from RBI's perspective, they are doing a lot. Internationally, also, financial literacy is now a very, very strong focus across the world. But we still see a difference between men and women. And of course, men from the very beginning are told that they have to manage their finances. So they're mentally proactive in trying to understand and learn things and do things themselves. But women still feel dependent. And I like the fact that we began our conversation by saying that women should not need permission. So there is a cultural conditioning which women have, because of which they feel they will not be able to understand, or it's too boring, or it's too complicated. And that barrier crossing is itself the biggest challenge for them to start beginning their journey towards financial empowerment. But from your perspective, is there a difference in which the policymakers see men and women differently to make it more easy for women, or women and men are like considered equal and say, this is what we want to do at a global level for financial empowerment?
I think the way one needs to think about this, and that's how the policymakers are also thinking in most parts, is that every customer has different needs. It's as simple as saying that when you have a salaried individual who's getting a fixed monthly income every single month, is a very different profile from somebody who's running a shop and sees cyclical and seasonal sales. Both are running businesses, both are earning money, but they earn money through different means, and their pattern of earning that money is very different.
True.
So that does not make one less attractive than the other from a financing standpoint or from a bankability standpoint. What is needed is that you need to design products that suit each of their cash flows. So yes, when you have a monthly salary coming in, you can match a monthly EMI loan against that monthly salary. And therefore, that would work perfectly well for you, that you have a salary coming on the 5th, and on the 15th, you have a EMI payment that comes and, takes that money from your account. But when you do the same thing to a shopkeeper, it will never work for him.
True, because he doesn't get regular.
Because a shopkeeper will be based on daily cash flows. You have working capital cycles, you have seasonal ups and downs. You might have a low season, you might have a high season like during Diwali or before Diwali. So what you need to do is to design products that mimic that. And there are a lot of SME financing, for example, that's happening, which is the repayment is linked to your sales, to your revenue. There's, you have different types of options. So it's the same thing goes with men and women. It's about, women have different needs. They need flexibility of different kinds. They need smaller value transactions. So for the longest time, banks used to penalize small value transactions. Like if you want, and your minimum withdrawal limit has to be higher than this, your minimum account balance has to be so much. What is all of those barriers to say, if you're too small, don't come to us, we are not encouraging you.
Right.
And that itself then excludes a lot of people who actually want to do transactions, but maybe they just want to do a 50 rupee transaction.
True. But that's changed with UPI coming.
But that has changed. It is changing, and you need to have different sets of accounts for different people. For your high net worth individuals, you have a different product. For someone who is a small customer who would want to do more frequent small value transactions, you offer a different product. You cannot take a one size fits all thing and then say, well, it doesn't work, or these customers are not profitable. Well, I don't think it's about the customers not being profitable or the customers being too risky. I think it's about a mismatch in the product market fit.
So well said. So women need different products as compared to men. Is that a fair statement to say?
In some cases, not always, in some cases. Like if you have a salaried woman and a salaried man working for a similar thing, maybe they don't, but it depends.
But the investment product might be different.
Investment product might be different. The loan products that you're taking may be different. Even on the savings side, you might need more flexibility for your daily cash flow management. You might need more withdrawals and more deposits. It all depends. In rural areas, people might want a different thing. In urban areas, people where they have better access and more ATMs and more penetration of POS machines, it might be different compared to a rural resident. So I would think it's all about getting your product market fit right based on the customer segments.
So I actually remember somebody had said this, and just to draw an analogy, that all cars are designed with thinking about men. So a woman generally has a purse. Okay, they don't have a place to put the purse in the next to a woman driver. That where should she put her purse? They'll have places for the sunglasses. They have a place for the mobile, for all of those things, for the coffee and everything, which is very male centric, right?
True.
But they haven't thought about designing a car with women specific needs. Now, when policymakers also take decisions, I hope that is changing from the perspective to start thinking that men and women both contribute 50% each of the population. So when you design policies, products, frameworks, it has to be centered around both the sets of population, right? Rather than thinking of one person and say, what are their needs, what are their wants, and then women just kind of float around in the back trying to figure out things. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think a lot of the product design, of course, is with the banks and the providers, not with the policymakers. But I'll give you a simple example of a policy initiative that actually has closed the gender gap in India for financial, inclusion. That is now based on the latest Findex survey, both men and women have equal penetration of holding a bank account, which used to be as high as in double digits till a few years ago. And what made that difference? I think the biggest stumbling block for women in India to open a bank account was they did not have a proof of identity.
Yes.
They
Yes.
never had an electricity bill in their name. They had no property in their name. They did not have any kind of an ID card because they were not working or anything. They didn't have a driver's license. So many, many, many women just simply did not have a proof of identity to be able to go and open a bank account and fulfill the KYC requirements.
True.
The rollout of Aadhaar changed that. So when the Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana was rolled out, a larger number of women accounts were opened than men. Because for the first time, thanks to Aadhaar, a lot of women got a document that allowed them to open a bank account.
They got their identity. Wow. Isn't that huge? They literally got an identity. And when you say that, I remember I'd gone to my mom's place, and the lady worker who works there, she literally said that, now I have an Aadhaar card and I have a PAN card. And so I planned to, at least there was a thought. Till then she wasn't saving at all, literally living hand to mouth, in the sense the salary comes, it gets spent on everything, no idea about saving money, idea about investing, to, you don't even think about it, but not even saving money. And I mean, when I was, of course, as a part of my mission, I generally keep doing that, chatting with women and trying to, incentivize them to save, to plan their money, to plan for their future. And she actually got excited that, yes, I have all these documents with me, and so I can now go actually and open a bank account. So I think that's beautiful. That, yes, giving an identity to women, and Aadhaar has definitely done that. That's lovely. So yes, let's talk about, so if you see a 23-year-old girl who is undervaluing herself, first she's undervaluing herself, what would you say to her?
I would simply say that you need to just find your self confidence and self belief and start with believing in yourself every single day.
How does that happen?
You count your blessings, you be grateful for what you have, and just wake up in the morning, look at the mirror, and just tell yourself that I'm in charge of my own happiness, I'm in charge of my own life, and I will do whatever it takes to meet my own dreams.
That's important, right?
I think it has to start from there. Without that, no matter how much of help and support you may get, you will never be able to make the leap. Because help and support is always transitory. It can happen for some time. You can get a support and help and motivation from your parents, from your partner, from a friend, from whoever. But they have their own lives to live.
True.
And they have their own perspective.
True.
So you will then be living their version of life for you. Versus saying, I need to decide. First of all, even before you come to the point of deciding, just believing in myself and saying, yes, I can do this, and I'm happy with who I am. There's that famous dialogue of Kareena Kapoor in Jab We Met. मैं अपनी favorite हूँ.
Serious.
You really have to be in love with yourself.
Yes. So true. So true. Okay, so now you're in love with yourself, and then you go to an organization and you see that there is a gender pay gap, and the woman sees that she's being given lesser salary as compared to her male peer. What would you tell a woman now?
See, there is a lot of unfairness, a lot of episodes of exploitation, rudeness. Everything will come your way. In a long life journey, the world is not perfect. People are not perfect. So it'll be foolish to expect that everybody is going to be very nice to you. They're going to be very fair to you. They are going to take care of what is the right thing for you. That's not going to happen. Yes, there are, not to say that everybody is bad. No, you will find your own share of people who genuinely wish well for you and will support you and will encourage you and all of that. But I think to expect that the world will be perfect and none of this will happen to me, I think that is asking for too much. So, yes, you will face a fair share of biases, discrimination. The way is not to hope that it does not happen, not to hope that the other person changes and therefore you withdraw because this has happened to you. I think it's about making it known that that's not acceptable to you. And you then make your choices accordingly. If some place and some job or some organization is not treating you well, you have a choice to continue or not to continue. That's your choice.
Yeah.
It's not in your hands to change that organization's behavior. Yes, you can try, you can give feedback, you can complain, you can do all of that, which you should do. But the only thing that's in your control is to make your choice of whether you want to continue to be in that environment or do you choose to walk away and do something else.
Yeah.
And I think that is what comes with that self-confidence.
Yeah, and that's where I think fear is what governs a lot of women, that they don't want to rock the boat because they have a job and they should be grateful that they have a job. They shouldn't lose their job, and that's why they don't want to go and negotiate a salary, because what if they're told to leave and that fear sets in? Then the fear sets in that what if, and the losing a job is something which always makes women very fearful, and because their jobs start defining their identity. And when they go back, they're facing so much resistance at home to even come to the job, a lot of women, that they feel that the moment if by chance they lose that, then one, their identity goes away. Two, they listen, when they go back, they listen to stories from their own family that what did you do? You left your family for this, and now see, you don't even have a job. So the kind of baggage women carry when they go for work is very subconscious. They also take a lot of weight about what I can't be seen losing my job. I can't be seen that I'm not performing well, because that's where, I've fought so many people. I've literally fought the world to come here, and now what if I lose the job? How do you see things like these changing for women, that they start talking for themselves, they start believing in themselves, and they start feeling that it's okay if I lose my job, my worth is much more, and it doesn't get defined by the job?
I think the best way to think about this is to, first of all, not do, like you mentioned the word that people, many women, they fight a lot of forces to be able to work, which is true. But if you're only coming from a place of wanting to prove yourself to somebody, it won't be very sustainable. You should come from a place of an aspiration, a desire to do something, not from a place of I want to show that person something, I want to prove something to someone, I want to take revenge over someone. But if you come from the place of I am doing this because it's important for me, I am doing this because I derive happiness out of this, I am doing this because it empowers me and it gives me confidence, then your decision variable will not be determined by what does your family think if you lose that job. Your decision variable will be, well, this job is not serving my purpose, so it's better I lose it rather than I continue with it, because my purpose is to be happy. My purpose is to be empowered. Yeah. And if this is not serving that purpose, I do not wish to continue, and that's a choice I am making.
Lovely. But what about security? A lot of women work for the money that is coming in, right? And that provides them a sense of security, and that security is very important to them because they don't want to be dependent. and at least they're getting something. Tomorrow you're trying to fight a system and say, okay, I'm going to negotiate better and I want to get a higher pay, but God forbid, if at least the way they think, if they lose their job, then they don't even have this much. And then the security that they are creating for themselves, or the independence that they're creating for themselves in their mind, is something which will go away. Because they start defining their worth with that. It's an identity issue which becomes through the work that they have. So how, and it's interesting, that's because I speak to so many women, I realize that they define the identity from the job. They value the job a lot, and they feel that their worth is much more than what they're being paid for. Despite that, they're unwilling to negotiate, they're unwilling to speak, and they feel that the work will speak for itself. Oh, I'm doing my best, I'm putting my work, I will. And you've been in a corporate job for all your, most of your life. Without speaking, will you get your worth in organizations?
So I think I can completely understand all of these behaviors that you just outlined. The way to think about it is a few things. Number one, as I said, you have to be the first person speaking for yourself. If you do not speak for yourself, you cannot expect somebody else to fight the case for you. Whether even a simple thing that you have done some great work, you worked on a project which was something very interesting, or even a small thing, you made a nice presentation. Do not hesitate to let the person who matters know that this is what I've done.
True.
People are very busy, and it's absolutely all right to bring it to their attention what you've done. And even just to express your pride and your pleasure that I did this and I really enjoyed it. And I think I'm very proud of what I've been able to do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in doing it. In fact, it's a good way for letting people know about the great work you are doing. The second thing I would say is, in terms of defining your identity based on a particular role or a particular organization or a particular job that you're doing, it does tend to happen, especially if you've been doing that for a long time. You kind of, it becomes almost synonymous to you. I think what is important is if you have the confidence that I have these skills, I have these expertise, and if not this, there's something better I can do, then you will not hesitate. And one of the things that has always worked for me is, throughout my career, I've changed a lot of roles, I've changed a lot of organizations. I think the reason all of that happened was I always looked at a new opportunity as a new job or a new organization or a new role as an opportunity for me to grow. And when I say opportunity to grow, I'm not necessarily saying grow in terms of I've got a 10% salary hike or a 20% salary hike. Growth in terms of my expertise, growth in terms of my, what skills I bring. So only if you put your hand up to do something new that you've never done before, will you grow. If you keep doing what you've always done, you will never grow, because you will just stay stagnant at that level. So you always have to say, okay, I have been doing this, I'm really good, I have worked in accounts, I'm amazing at, accounts. Can I now, along with that, also take on an additional responsibility of doing something extra, which is new to me? I have never handled Forex, but it's very complicated, I know, but let me try.
Yeah. And I love that, because that's what most people end up doing. They wait that when they get promoted, they will do the next level of work, whereas it works the other way around. When you start doing the work which is more than your level, then automatically over a period of time you will get a promotion and a raise. So absolutely, and so well said. Yes. So very interesting. Okay, so this is something which I'd love to ask you. What are some of the tools and the mindset that you have used in your high stake decision environments that you have been in? How has your mindset been? What are the tools that you've used from your own?
I think I'm very much a first principles person. I
Okay.
always kind of start with the very basic. What is the problem that we are trying to solve? Who are the stakeholders? For me, that's very, very important to identify who are the stakeholders, who are the people who are going to get impacted or have a say in that decision. Um, and why and I always feel that any solution or decision is the right decision if it turns out to be a win-win for everyone. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's not that a bank is choosing between their shareholder and the customer. It's a win-win. How could you do good to your customer as well as do good to your
Right.
how, if you are working on a partnership, what's in it for your partner? What is the partner going to get? What is it that we are going to get? Always think of what's in it for them, what's in it for you. As long as there is something in it for everyone, it will make everyone happy, it will lead to everyone being committed to it, and it will result in the best results for everyone. So that, I think, is a mindset that has worked very well for me. Think of the stakeholders and think of what's in it for each of them.
That's very good, and that's perfect if there can be a win win situation. But do you see sometimes that the situation is not a win win situation? If there is a win for one, it is not a win for the other. Have you seen a situation like that?
Usually not, but even if that is the case, then what you're trying to do is to minimize uh, um, the pain for someone else. But then, even then, if it's just a pain for someone, there has to be some motivation. I think it's not a good idea to work on the basis that I am taking from somebody and giving it to someone. That won't last for too long. You can maybe take it from someone for some time, but it won't be sustainable. It'll break down at some point, and therefore the equilibrium will strike again based on everybody is getting something out of it.
So, until a balance and an equilibrium is struck, I think things will keep moving till that equilibrium settles for every human being,
Yes.
right? Whether it's a man or a woman. So true. What does financial empowerment mean to you at this stage of your life? For yourself?
It means freedom.
Okay.
It means freedom to choose, freedom to decide, freedom to follow your dreams.
And have you achieved it?
Yes, I think because I think the biggest benefit I have is I can choose to do work that inspires me, do work that I enjoy, and not do work just for the money it's offering me. Not to say that money is not important, but for me, that's not the sole criteria. And I've been fortunate that it need not be the sole criteria. And that's why I feel it gives me that freedom to also choose other criterias and then make my choices.
Do you think you have the privilege to do that as compared to some others who may not have this privilege of choosing what you want to do over monetary?
Yes, there are stages of life, and different people would go through a different evolution. There would be stages of life where monetary requirements are your primary need, and you need to prioritize that. And it need not just be for an individual all throughout, it could be different phases for the same individual. But I think what is important is you should be able to prioritize differently based on how your life is evolving. And I'm not trying to say that money is not something one should aspire for, or you would not want to earn well. All I'm saying is that your priorities in life could be shifting, and to be able to manage those shifting priorities is where you need that empowerment and that confidence to be able to make those choices.
Beautiful. So, what is the vision you see for yourself and for the world when it comes to gender pay gap and equality of women? What is it that what is the vision that you are seeing in the future of what you can create, and how does the world look for you in the future?
The world looks like, my favorite thing is to say that when I say financial empowerment for all, it's really about each individual having the accessibility and authority to use the financial tools for their own benefit in the optimal way, and and have complete confidence and agency in doing that. I think that is, for me, the epitome of what empowerment encompasses. Because that level of confidence is finally, the bedrock of that agency and empowerment.
Lovely. And when somebody thinks of Smita, what is the legacy she wants to leave for the world?
My role, I'm a very small person in this entire ecosystem.
That's what you think.
My role is, if I can use my voice, my access, my network to spread this message across to more people, to make their problems and their voices heard, and to find solutions that are better suited for their needs. I think for me, that itself is a huge task to do, and that's an ongoing journey for me to, how do I, whatever I have learned, whatever access and privileges I have, how do I use that to raise the voices of people who do not enjoy that access and privilege.
Lovely. And so more power to you. You know that I draw so much inspiration from you. And at Moola for Women, we are doing our little work to see that the women around us are able to raise their voices, know their worth. And thank you so much for first being you, doing what you're doing, empowering so many people around the world, giving access to financial solutions for people, and really lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much, Meeta. I so enjoyed this discussion, and I'm a huge fan of your work at Moola. So keep going. The world needs a lot of people like you.
Thank you.
So best wishes.
Thank you so much.